Welcome, everybody. My name is Gary Grote. I'm the Executive Director for the Greater East Aurora Chamber of Commerce, and we're here for our sixth presentation of Real World Careers Meet the Professionals. And we're very glad to have the Village of East Aurora Police Chief Shane Krieger here with us to discuss careers in law enforcement. You know, our purpose in doing this the past couple months is to help connect students and teachers directly with individuals in various careers and industries to provide a background and pathway to possible career fields. So it's really giving that direct connection to the students and educators. We're asking everybody to please stay muted. If you have questions, you can submit them to the chat room, and we're taping this segment for future use. So you'll be able to have access to it at a later time. We'd also like to thank Absolute Care of Aurora Park for their sponsorship of this series to help make it happen. And I'd like to right now thank and introduce Police Chief Shane Krieger. Chief, thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
No problem, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Yep. And we're obviously here to talk about careers in law enforcement, but maybe if you can give a little bit of an introduction to yourself and how you got into the law enforcement field, and we'll kind of talk about some of the other branches and education required and things like that as we move forward. So I'll turn it over to you, okay?
Great. Thank you. Again, my name's Shane Krieger. I'm the police chief of the East Aurora Town of Aurora Police Department. I've been with the department for 29 years. I've been chief since 2014 or 15, sorry. I was previous to that, I was a lieutenant, a road lieutenant. I was also a canine handler and several other positions such as field training officer, bike patrol unit, and others, I'm sure. I was born and raised in East Aurora. I got interested in getting into law enforcement when I was in college, taking criminal justice classes that I took just out of interest, and enjoyed them so much that it wanted me to move in a direction of the career. And I was hired when I was 22 years old, and it's been a interesting journey through the last 29 years.
What school did you go to? Buffalo State or?
ECC.
ECC?
And they had an excellent criminal justice program back then at ECC North. They've expanded that program, and the instructors were retired police officers from all fields, local, state, and federal officers. And it was an excellent program and still is today.
Yeah. Well, can you talk about, I guess maybe to give a little overview too of the East Aurora Police Department, so people have a sense of, I think people are familiar with East Aurora Police, but not with the structure of it and the number of officers and things like that.
Sure. We cover the entire town of Aurora. We're a little bit different than most departments. Most departments are a town department that cover any villages within their town. We're a village police department that contracts with the town of Aurora to cover the entire town, which is approximately 36 square miles, bordered by Colden, Orchard Park, Elma, and Wales, and a little bit of Holland. We have 16 total officers currently. We've been as low as 13 over my career and as high as 17. We do have one vacant position right now, the 17th position. We have 4 patrol lieutenants, currently 1 detective, and 9 patrolmen. We have a part-time school resource officer that works within all 3 of our school districts or school buildings, who's a retired police officer who was a full-time SRO, retired, and then kept on as a part-time 20 hours a week SRO. We operate, sorry, Gary, we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our dispatch center actually dispatches fire and EMS for 6 surrounding towns, including the town of Aurora. So it's a fairly a busy area that we have responsibility over.
What about, you mentioned the vacancy that you have. What do you look for in candidates for an entry level or a vacancy position in the EA Police Department?
Well, and speaking to our audience, anybody that wants to get into law enforcement really has to be careful the decisions they make as teenagers and young people, because it is such a competitive career to get into that if you have any blemishes on your career, they could affect you negatively in finding a job. You know, obviously any arrest could negatively affect being hired. You know, drug use obviously would negatively affect your being hired. So there, you know, you got to you got to be serious about wanting to get into law enforcement. It's unlike any career out there. We don't work banker's hours. A lot of people, young people, think, you know, they can come in and be a detective day one, and that's just not how it works. You gotta start working the road, and probably that's going to entail working midnights and working holidays and working weekends, and you're going to miss a lot of events with friends and family because our schedules, again, you know, it's if you're due to get off at 11 o'clock at night and you have a bad accident that happens at 10:45, you're probably going to be stuck at work for a couple extra hours, and it's been known to upset family and friends and when you can't make plans. But again, it's an excellent career. I would never have changed my what I went through and did, even though you did miss birthday parties and you weren't always there on Christmas. But again, it's a career where you really can make a difference helping people, and it's a great position to be in.
Yeah, what you mentioned earlier in terms of you know, a student's background and what they do with their in their younger years, and you know, things that might jeopardize the opportunity to be an officer. It relates a lot to other types of industries where people who are looking for employees kind of look at the same things, but also look, in addition, for people that they're hiring, individuals who can be part of a team, who work well with others, who have a good personality. I'm sure those kinds of things are characteristics you look for when you're hiring an officer.
There's more than I could name right now. Absolutely, you got to be a team player. You got to be motivated. This is a career where you're out in a car by yourself, expected to do certain jobs, and you have to be the type of person that doesn't get distracted and performs your tasks as you've been directed. You know, it's you have supervision, but it's not in an office sitting at a desk next to you. It's in a car or somewhere else in the community. So you have to be able to handle yourself in multiple situations as you've been trained all by yourself for until backup arrives or what have you.
What kind of training, I mean, prior to, I mean, if a potential candidate goes to school, has a law enforcement degree, do they necessarily have to have a degree in law enforcement?
No, absolutely not. Right now, most municipal police departments, you have to have a minimum of 60 credit hours. You don't need to have, that's an equivalent of associate's degree. You don't have to have the degree, and it does not have to be in criminal justice. Matter of fact, a lot of people will look into degrees in another interest that they have. in case they don't, or it takes them a while to get a law enforcement job, or they don't ever aren't lucky enough to be selected for a position, then they have a degree to fall back on for to do another career. A lot of people have gotten into law enforcement with degrees in finance and have side jobs or retirement jobs doing taxes or financial advisors or electricians or what have you. There's plenty of opportunity to do that because you can retire after 20 years with law enforcement.
What about, you hear about police academy and things like that. Is that part of the requirement if once somebody, prior to somebody being hired, or something that somebody has to go to during their training period?
It's not a requirement to have prior to being hired, but once you're hired, you have to attend the 5 to 6 month police academy. ECC North does have a citizens police academy now where you can pay college tuition to go through, if you're selected, to go through the police academy prior to being hired. Now, what that does is makes you more of a viable candidate for a police agency because they won't have to spend 5 months sending you to the police academy. And once you get hired, if you have the pre-academy, you only have to go back to the academy once hired for a few weeks to do firearms and emergency vehicle operation and a couple other sensitive law enforcement trainings that you can't get prior to being appointed.
Can you talk about some of those other areas that are addressed in the police academy or in a criminal justice program that help prepare an officer? I'm not sure in terms of what other areas that there are. I'm sure, I can state the obvious in terms of, how to handle your weapons, how to deal with maybe specific situations like accidents and things like that. What are things, just so, maybe some of our students have an idea of what they're getting into and what they may experience in an academy or in an educational situation that would transfer to a real life police enforcement situation?
Sure. The academy, well, law enforcement's a paramilitary situation where, you're given orders, you're expected to follow them. And that started off in the police academy. There's inspections. You have to wear a uniform when you're in the academy, and generally in the morning as the academy begins, the cadets line up for inspection. You have to be clean shaven. Your hair has to be at certain lengths, can't be covering your ears, or females' hair has to be in a ponytail or certain requirements. But if you can imagine anything and everything that law enforcement does during any given day, you get a little bit of training on that in the police academy. Once you're out of the police academy, your training's far from completed. Then you go into, once you're hired, into a field training program where the little bit of information you received in that 5 or 6 month academy is put to real use while you're with a field training officer, whether it's dealing with mental health crises, traffic enforcement, DWI situations, first aids, using a defibrillator on somebody who's had a heart attack, dealing with traffic accidents, domestics, crimes of all sorts, whether it's a shoplifter in a store, or I could go on and list everything, but
right.
It's just within the academy you get, again, a little bit of training, maybe a 2-hour block of training on that topic, and then you're required to keep a notebook with all your notes and all the classes you've had, and which is a great resource that you can look back at down the road when you have a situation where, geez, I know we had training on that. And you can look it up and see how you were told to to handle that situations, or what resources you had to use for a certain situation.
So it really, I mean, it really takes a unique, special person to be a law enforcement officer. I mean, with the different areas that you have to cover, all the human interactions that you have, all the situations that could possibly ever happen, you have to be prepared for.
You do. You know, shortly after I began my job, and right after I completed field training officers, or field training school, or training with my trainers, one of my first serious accidents was a fatal accident. And when you've never seen a dead body before, and you're there dealing with it, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Do most municipalities hire in the same way that East Aurora does, or are there other considerations that are made? I mean, whether, you know, let's just talk locally in the village or the different towns, or even with the sheriffs, how they handle things.
Sure. Basically, it's all very similar within Erie County, or anywhere in New York State. You have to take a civil service test to be, and pass to be on the list to be hired as a police officer. Most towns will hire off their town preference list. So everybody from that town who's taken the exam and passed it would be on that list, and it's all graded. And then we have to follow civil service rules, where the top 3 grades are the only candidates that we can select from. So there's numerous rules that go on and on and on. So it kind of varies and changes to who's reachable to be hired. But it all starts with taking civil service exams, whether it's for Erie County, the state police, even federal agencies have exams that you have to take to be qualified to be qualified or be reachable to take the next step for interviews. So it's just taking exams and taking as many exams as you can to give yourself the best opportunity to get into law enforcement.
Does having a military background, does that help? Is that an advantage?
Oh, certainly, yeah. Absolutely. You know, it's especially with as many areas that the military's in these days, with that training, usually fits in very well with law enforcement.
Well, can you tell, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but can you talk about some of the other areas of law enforcement, you know, maybe the state troopers, FBI, CIA, to the extent that you're aware of those professions, how, if there's students interested in that, how they can get into those areas? I know, like for the state troopers, you mentioned the exam and everything else, but can you talk about those?
Sure. The state police, again, within New York State, it's very similar to our hiring process, just on a much larger scale. The state police offer an exam every so often, every couple of years, and you have to score very high on it, and then they'll go through and canvass their list and start their backgrounds and call people in for interviews. You know, the same thing with federal agencies. Although, if you're interested in whether it's Secret Service, FBI, the Marshals, any law enforcement federally, you got to do a little bit of research. And I'm not up to speed on what they're looking for now, but like the FBI used to always be looking for people with their law degrees or people with finance degrees because of the work they do. And the white collar crime and financial crimes that they really look into and involve, and you need those degrees to make yourself more interested or more receptive into what they're looking for their positions. But again, there's tests for every agency, and you just got to do your research and contact them and find out when their tests are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is interesting that, and like you said, for some areas that even like you said, for the local law enforcement positions, that you don't necessarily have to have a law degree or a criminal justice degree. It can be a particular background as long as you can pass the test. But I, like you said, I guess that's if you have a special interest in some areas that you can Google FBI or Secret Service or like the marshals that you said and see what their requirements are. But you don't have to have uh, a criminal justice background to get into some of those areas immediately, probably if they're looking for a particular area.
Right. Right. Yeah. They, especially as big as the federal government is, and there's law enforcement agencies in the federal government that I probably never even heard of before. So there's all sorts of different avenues to take. And again, it depends on what you're looking to do. If you're good in finances and want to investigate financial crimes and go through bank records, then the FBI would probably be, a great place for you. If you want to be more of a hands-on person and actually be out on the road in some sort of law enforcement function, then local, state, or the marshals would be one way, because the marshals, the U.S. Marshals, they're out looking for fugitives and they're out investigating certain crimes that other agencies aren't doing. So, there's a lot of different avenues to look at.
So, I mean, this, even though it's tough, the law enforcement career are very fulfilling, for the right person though, too. I mean, you have to fit into that, the categories that you mentioned earlier, but really really a very challenging job for those that are willing to, get into it.
It is, it's, we first started carrying defibrillators several years ago, and I was able to have the first successful use of one in our town, and got to know the gentleman that I saved, and he was around for another 10 years, I believe, and would run into me every once in a while, and tell me I was kind of a handy guy to have around. So, you have stories like that, and it's just, it makes a lot of bad stuff all worthwhile.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a position that you can truly make a difference in other people's lives. So as we wrap up, Shane, are there any kind of final words or anything that you would recommend to any of the students watching this regarding a law enforcement position?
Oh, yes. Again, it's a fantastic career. And if you're from the community and are privileged enough as I was to get a job in my hometown and work as long as I have and been able to come in contact with as many people as I have, it's just, it's a fantastic life. I raised, my wife and I are raising our two sons here. And I wouldn't have asked for doing it any other way. So, it's a great opportunity to give back to your community and to be part of the solution. And I highly encourage it.
Well, congratulations and thanks to you and everybody on the local force for all the work that they do. We truly appreciate it, and we know it's a tough job, but as you said, it's rewarding, and it's a position. These are positions that make a difference in our community. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here today and give us your information on careers in law enforcement. So I'd like to thank Chief Krieger for doing that. I'd also like to thank Absolute Care again for sponsoring this program to make it enable us to provide this for our students. And I'd also like to remind everybody that our next program is Wednesday, April 14th. We have Mark Andel, who is the owner of General Welding and Fabricating, and also the Made in America store. And those of you that don't know him, he's really a very enthusiastic individual about business, about buy an American, and he'll talk about careers in manufacturing and retail and entrepreneurship. So we hope you can join us on Wednesday the 14th at 10 o'clock. And again, Chief, thank you very much for being with us today. It was really appreciated, and it was really good information.
No problem, Gary. It was my pleasure.
Everybody have a good day, and thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.